So thank you guys all for coming. I think this is a little bigger turnout than we were expecting, so it's great. Today, kind of our hope is really just to talk about what the value there is in presentation skills, and realizing that being a skill, this does take a lot of time and effort, like anything else we do in our job. So this is actually going to be one of many of these little workshops that we're going to kind of be doing to build upon all of these skills. So with that, if while we go through all of this stuff, if you guys just keep in mind or jot down like what interests you or what you want to hear more about or challenges you, then we'll try and incorporate all of that in the next one so that all of this content is really geared towards what's going to help you guys every day.
There's no audio.
No audio? Okay.
That one gets muted.
This one's already muted. Is it working now?
Can you hear us? No?
Okay. Let's try this mute.
It says they're saying you guys are muted.
Oh. The actual.
But I think that one's supposed to be. Okay, what about now? This one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anything
probably
coming
fine.
through? Yeah?
Yeah.
Anything coming through?
No?
I mean, worst case, you could probably just start picking out one.
It's really, really loud.
It should be anyways. Okay, you're gonna be able to hold that one. Sorry, we literally spent 20 minutes trying to figure all this out before we started.
First rule in presenting is it never goes smooth.
Is there like a whole other presentation?
Can they hear what to do when? Awesome. All right. So I did not always think presenting was fun or important, and I definitely did not like prepping for them. Something probably not everyone knows about me is I used to sing opera when I would perform opera before I went to college. I did a lot of performance in middle school and high school at different community centers and off-Broadway shows, and I had a tremendous voice coach. She was starting to get a little frustrated with me because I was not prepping, was not rehearsing before the shows. I had the songs memorized, but I just was getting a little complacent, getting a little too comfortable. So she kind of elevated it once for me and the 4 students that she had, where she had an opportunity for us to go to the Met. So the Met is short for the Metropolitan Opera House. The Metropolitan Opera House is like essentially the most famous place for opera performance on the planet. It's in New York City. And while we weren't going to be performing in front of an audience, she wanted us to see what it would be like to perform at a space, at a venue of that scale. Just this sheer physics of being able to perform in an environment like that, and also the pressure of what it's like to perform in such a space and the emotions associated with it. I was the last person to perform, and I was finishing up my song, and I was finally excited about this. I had practiced. We had this set up for 2 weeks in advance, so I had practiced a lot, pretty much any available time I had. My mom was certainly one to complain about it. And when I was finishing up the song, I got close to choking up. And I finished the song. I actually don't really remember finishing the song because I went into complete autopilot. I practiced so often that I really didn't have to think about it anymore. But I almost choked up because walking down the aisle towards my voice coach was Luciano Pavarotti. He essentially, if anyone hasn't heard of him, he is the quintessentially most well-known opera singer in modern history. And she had a connection there, and my guess is it was part of her master plan. But afterwards, after the performance, he had the opportunity, took the time to talk to each and every one of us and give some feedback. One of his comments I'll never forget is to always drink your tea with the room temperature and with the lemon. And I thought that it was just so random, but I'll never forget that moment. I won't forget it because I remember just thinking, holy crap, imagine if I didn't prep for this performance. Wasn't expecting to be there, but if I hadn't been prepared. These things happen all the time. It doesn't have to be a hero. It could be a hero. It could be a client coming in that you're not expecting. It could be a boss walking in to your presentation or meeting that you're hosting. And it could be an internal team, boss walking into a meeting like that. There's all these things unexpected that come, and when you prepare, if you're ready at any time, it's always an opportunity to show your value. So today we're going to talk about the lineup. So we're going to go through a few things in everyday presentation. So we're going to talk about having the right mindset in a presentation. We're going to talk about having the right techniques and being prepared with all the foundations of what it's like to present and what you need. We're going to talk about practicing, different things we can do to practice and be up to date and always ready. We're going to talk about discovering your own personal style, and then we'll talk about next steps, things we're going to do next.
We're going to start with the right mindset and focusing. Fun fact is my dad was a drill sergeant, so growing up I was actually around a very different kind of presenting, but he's one of those people that always has these great one-liners that you never forget. And there's this one that I actually read before almost any time I present, because it's a really great reminder of the fact he was trying to say that we all have this untouchable piece of our personality, and that if we hone that the right way and focus it towards the presentation, we can kind of use that as the lever to get the audience on our side so they can capture with us and kind of connect with us in the right way. So it's always about having the right mindset, and that includes what you're doing as well.
So as consultants, we want to have the right mindset. That's first and foremost. And one of the things to do that successfully is to know who's in the ring. And what we mean by that is know who's in the space, but also know who you're fighting with. So as a intrepid consultant, you're not just talking about yourself and your expertise. You're representing your department, you're representing the company as a whole, you're representing the team that's running the project with you. So when you're in that meeting, whether it's official or whether it's something more casual every day, it's always about knowing who is there and who you're representing.
At Intrepid, kind of every single day, what we're doing is like a very small piece of presenting. The majority of what we're doing is meetings, is Slack, is email, is walking the clients to lunch, and chatting those personal stories. All of that is still presenting, because the basis of presenting is just speaking and having a conversation, and someone is evaluating you. So whether that's a teammate or a client or anyone, it's all in presenting, and it's what we're calling kind of this informal presenting. And with that comes kind of positives and negatives when it's really informal. On the positive side is that it's much simpler. When you're just walking into a meeting, you don't have to sit and practice and prepare multiple times. There are some light things you should do, of course, but generally there's a lot less pressure. You're not chilling up here, getting really nervous, or on a stage type of environment. But on the flip side of that, some of the cons, when it gets to be really casual, is that your mannerisms and what you're saying is also too casual as well. You have to always kind of remember that balance of being a consultant versus being someone like their friends. And it also, if you're not practicing and you're not realizing what is a presentation, you're not preparing the right way, you start to lose your edge. Presenting is not like riding a bike. You can't just learn it once, leave it alone for a while, and then get back on it and be just as good as you were. If you have to work at this over and over and over, like, we still get nervous just coming up here if you haven't done this in a while, even though this is a safe environment with our coworkers. So just knowing what presenting is.
So there are three fundamentals to any presentation you're going to do. You always want to know the audience. So what I mean by audience is knowing who is in the room and who you're speaking to. It might be an internal team, so you'll know or will want to know who represents each department. That's an obvious one. But sometimes it's client meetings. And those client meetings, you always want to know something specific about those clients, who they represent, and what kind of agendas they may have. Always want to think about it from their point of view of what's successful to them, and then you can speak to that. You also want to know the context. So by context, I mean, what stage are we at? Why are we in this meeting? Is this a scrum? Is this some everyday stand-up? Is this a check-in that we're doing kind of one-off for the day to show progress. Is this a kickoff meeting? Is this a final presentation? Knowing the context of that will help you frame all the words, all of the phrasing, everything you're saying in that meeting to add further value. Then the last thing is always knowing the objective. What do you want to take away from that meeting? Always have the takeaway. You don't just finish with the takeaways, but have the takeaways in advance. Know what you want to get out of that meeting. If it's a kickoff, probably have some ideas of what you would do there. But if it's a conclusion, what do you want to do next? What's in the next steps? If you do all of these three elements, you're always going to be prepared in any environment for any type of meeting or presentation.
And we talked about how, most of our stuff is really informal and we need to be prepared. But that's also, again, recognizing what that line and that division is for our job and what position that we have. Because I think one of the beautiful things about Intrepid is the fact that we work really transparently with our clients and we start to get to know them really well, so they're on our side, they understand everything while we're going through the process. But this starts to bleed over into being their friend, and that's the moment we have to be conscious. Like what we're saying, we shouldn't complain if we're working late nights, we should always be excited even if we're really tired during the day. So it's just constantly realizing that they're evaluating what you're saying based on the success of their project. Did I spend the money in the right place? These very fundamental things if we forget where we're standing. So always maintaining a certain type of distance. Now, I went to grad school and had to present all the time, like 2 to 3 times a week. And I even had multiple classes that were specifically just for presenting. One of them was with my teacher, Peter Cowder. A few of us also have his book running around here. But I found this video, and I think it kind of encapsulates everything of what we're saying. To know who he is, he pretty much, his job is teaching agencies, teaching clients, international product houses. He even helped try and he was on the pitch team for the Boston Olympics to be here in Boston. So his job is teaching people to present successfully and have a story.
What you have to understand is that everything is a presentation. When you go out for lunch with your boss, that's a presentation. When you run into coworkers in the hallway and have a point of view about something that you're excited about, that's a presentation. The truth of it is you are being evaluated all the time. I know people are very, very upset at the notion of being judgmental or being judged. Well, get over it. You're being judged all the time as an individual and as a representative of possible. People are deciding what they think about possible predicated upon what they think about you. So bear that in mind. Everything's a presentation.
So we talked about mindset. Having the right mindset in any environment that you're going to be either having a meeting or giving a presentation. You also want to have the right techniques. Those are things you can rest on when you get nervous or when you realize the gravity of a meeting or when something happens unexpected. So I remember I was doing a smoker for the first time. A smoker is a non-sanctioned amateur boxing event. It's like there's no winner, there's no judges, but the audience is still there, still a whole lot of cheering, there's a lot of pressure. And I remember this is probably too much information, but I remember being in a stall and throwing up before the fight. And my boxing coach didn't knock in the bathroom, just walked right in, waxed his arm on the stall. He's like, "How you doing?" And I was like, what am I gonna say? I feel like shit. He's like, "Yeah." "You nervous?" I said, "Yeah." He's like, "You should be. You've been practicing for this. This matters. This is important to you. You should be nervous." And I didn't know what to expect. So it helped me think about the fact that being nervous about presenting or being in a meeting where maybe you're leading that meeting is not something to think nerves are problematic. It's a sign that it's important to you. So yeah, this really cool quote that I really always loved that was about how being nervous, being afraid of something, that's going to stop you from doing your best. Being nervous, it's a sign that this is important, that this matters, that you should try your best, and that you should focus. So we're going to talk about two fundamentals in the right techniques to presentation. One's having the right stance. The other is focusing on your form. Two different, very different polarizing elements that when they come together, they work really well.
We're going to start by focusing on the stance, and these are the ones that I believe are kind of the easier fundamentals that once you guys lock these down, they can be the ones that have the more tricks to. The rest are things that have to work on over time. So your stance at trumpet is kind of like your footing. It's the words, it's what you say. And what that's made up of is your content, your vocabulary, your knowledge, and your ideas. You start to think about the content first. It's not just the presentation that's up here. It's also your email. It's your Slack message. It's everything encapsulated, the PDFs, all of that makes up the content. And what you're presenting and putting up there matters. And I learned this kind of really funny fact. That same professor always said, you know, people can read. You don't need to read word for word what's up there. This kind of stuff, where all your documentation is actually supporting you because you are the focus. We are not the entirety of the content, is the entirety of the discussion. It's the supporting elements. And so one thing you kind of need to realize is that when you speak or when you're in a meeting, most people can only remember about 30% of what you say. And then when you combine all the other things like the gestures I'm using, what I'm wearing, paying attention to the words not, or the sound not working, etc., that goes down to about 7%, or said a little easier, 2 to 3 main ideas. So think about how you're framing your entire story to make sure that they're walking away with the 2 to 3 main things that you want them to get out of that, and constantly reinforce that. So, like actually, we just kill all of those filler words, those lead-ins. They are quite literally the hardest things to get rid of. I still say literally way too much. I'll use and pause. I kind of equate it to a zebra, where I have mentioned this to a few of you, that if I start telling you, you say so a lot, you're going to do that all the time, like you would think about a zebra if I told you not to. But after a while, because you're being aware of what you're saying, you'll eventually weed it out. Sometimes you'll replace it, like I'll say fundamentally instead of literally, you know, but it's just the act of being aware of what you're saying and watching that.
No one's perfect. We all do it. I do it. Chris does it, and we're doing a presentation on presenting. It's the difference of being aware of some of these tics or some of these kind of elements that you incorporate in your daily speech that helps you improve during the presentation. Filler words or lead-ins, those were developed during conversation. They're perfect for conversation. Helps you own the conversation when you're having something with a two-way street. But a presentation or a meeting that you're owning, people are listening to you. The interruptions are less frequent, so there's no need for them. One of the things I do is, or I've had done in the past, find someone you trust, someone who is going to probably, you know, mess with you a little bit, but you'll appreciate. Have them come to a meeting, or have them prep with you. Have them listen to how you're presenting, what you're saying, what you're doing. Maybe they pick something. So in my case, it's basically. I say basically all the time. Basically, I say basically for everything. Not needed. Now, when your friend's listening to you and you say basically 60 times in a 5-minute lecture or presentation, start to become aware of it. So those are like different techniques you can incorporate to improve on some of those little tips.
Another good one is to just breathe. When you feel that about to come out, like pause and take a breath. And ironically, it makes it look like you're thinking, so it kind of works out. Another way to really improve your vocabulary, when I was doing this presentation, I was also in another meeting, and someone did this tip that I'm just about to tell you, where we had divvied up who was supposed to talk, and they began to speak. And because they had their computer in front of them and their notebook, I knew that they were actually reading notes of what they had wanted to say, to talk about their thing, because they were kind of nervous. But it made it seem like they were very knowledgeable, they were very eloquent in what they said, because they wrote it down beforehand. That is the easiest way to make you come with better words that you're articulating like an expert, to make you sound more knowledgeable, to to make sure you don't forget anything that you wanted to talk about when you're describing something. So just jot it down beforehand. Even if it's a simple meeting like a check-in, there's still always ways you can improve and provide value.
There's also the I versus them or I versus they mentality to have. As consultants, we're paid for not just our opinions. In fact, by definition, we're not paid for our opinions. We're paid for our process. Our methodology, our process, that's rooted strongly in Intrepid and what we offer to clients. And we practice it every day. Sometimes we don't always articulate that because maybe we take it for granted because we do it so frequently. When you're talking to a client about something that you're doing or something you have done, it's not I think or I feel or I felt like. It's this is because this has been successful here. This has been successful for past projects like. There's a research element, there's a process element, which we should call attention to and focus on as a consultant. That's a better way of phrasing exactly what you're trying to get at. The feelings are all based, or they all exist because we know it's successful, but it's just phrasing as opposed to the I, the they.
And that research is all about providing value in the way that you're seeming knowledgeable. You're the expert in the room, and that's the reason why they chose to work with us. One of the things I think is always really funny about clients is if you realize you're not the one presenting or talking in the room, guess who they ask the question to? The person who's quiet. So what you need to make sure is that you know every single thing going on about your project, even if it's not your moment to present. Because if you're in that room, the client wants to make sure that you're the right person on the team, that you're the right person representing Intrepid. So you need to make sure that you know the material as well as everyone else does. Also because people get sick, or sometimes you're called upon to present for someone else. So if you know everything, you can step in and everyone has the same playing field on the team. Another kind of interesting thing I try to do sometimes is, especially when I'm trying to sell an idea that I know the client doesn't already know about or might be a new type of UX or technique or whatever, I pre-fill polls. So I'll write down questions in the moments in the presentation where I think they might try and dig at things or pick things out so that I already know how to respond to them when they, off the cuff, ask me a question in the room. Like, try and make sure you're thinking about what they could ask so that you're prepared and then you don't feel nervous, you don't freeze up when they ask you a question. All of this is talking about, you know, the ideas of what we're working on, of what we're presenting. But I don't mean ideas as in like the concept or the whole reason, like what the app actually is. I mean all of the things around that. So if you take like, say it's an app demo or whatever, and you're talking about, okay, there's a button on this page and then there's the menu here. It's not really how you want to describe it. You want to say, you know, the button is here because of this. It's round for this reason. The users are going to interact with it more because it's this color. Or the menu slides out and that's successful for this reason. You know, actually describing the differentiators, describing the competitors and what they're doing or why they're not doing it and why that's better that we do. You know, describing all those decision points that multiple members on the team have made, not just describing what the thing is, but why you're doing the thing or what's important about it.
To bring up again when we were saying, people can read, right? Articulating moves that I can clearly see in the presentation doesn't offer any additional value other than a narrator or an author, which we could record ourselves and just send it out through an email. So what you're trying to communicate is that it's about the strategy that's built you to get here. So if you are describing either a different interface that you've designed or a strategy in management or in the next step in the project, all of that wants to be approached from the big picture. What's the strategy? Why have you gotten here? Not what's on the screen that they can already read. So we talked a lot about stance. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about form. Having the right form that you can kind of rest on when you get into a position that you weren't expecting. These are things like having the right rhythm, having more social elements in your presentation skills. So if it was before about before it was about what you say in your stance, now it's about how you say it. So these are more of the softer skills that you incorporate during the presentation. Those things based on tone, volume, posture, and then the emotion behind it. We touched on tone a little bit. Tone can really express how interested you or how interested an audience should be.
If I was just going to present to you guys like this the entire time, do you think I give a fuck about what I'm saying? Do you? Probably not. Tone matters.
Tone affects also how an audience is going to react. So if you're not excited about the work, how can you expect somebody else to be excited about it? And that's what the presentation skills and the soft element are going to help enforce. So your audience reacts to how you react. How excited you are about the work, they're going to reflect that as well.
Tone can also really help when clients are getting very frustrated, or if something really unexpected comes up in the room, how you react to it and the way you modulate your tone can actually implode and make a situation way worse, or it can completely diffuse it, because if you're reacting logically when a client's freaking out, they're going to realize they're the only one in the room doing that and everyone else is still calm like an adult. So just always be conscious that these softer things can highly affect small moments or big moments in a meeting. Or if I'm yelling just to get my point across, so I'm talking over him, how do you think that makes you feel when you're presenting?
It's not just about feelings too, right? It's about confidence. I mean, we're all very passionate about what we know here. Each department has really passionate, very thorough processes in what we create, regardless of if it's design, if it's project management, if it's development. So the key though is how are we expressing that to a client? And so when you're excited about that work and you are confident in it, volume really helps kind of encourage that confidence, or it can detract from it as well. When you might be the strongest, smartest expert in that room about that subject, but if you're not giving off that indication to a client, that's what they're going to see. Again, they only retain, most people, it's not they meaning clients, but people in general, are retaining only 30% of what you're saying. Make sure you can be heard, and make sure you're not obnoxious at the same time.
So there's this last thing on here about let it marinate and not drown. And if I was going to talk the whole time and then just kind of go to the next idea, and like without breathing at all, you guys can't think or separate or understand what I'm really trying to communicate. So there's this idea about letting things marinate. So it's having the right pacing also with your volume, that when you're speaking, you pause enough that people can digest and connect to what you're saying, but then you also don't want to just say something, let it leave really awkwardly long pauses, so then they realize that and they lose everything all over again. So just start to watch how fast you talk or how slow. I'm Italian, I used to talk way too fast. I had to learn how to pace correctly.
And there are little strategies you can do to try out. I have a silly one that has worked well for me, and that's just counting to Mississippi. So sometimes when I say something that I really want someone to focus on, I have a 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, dramatic pause. And that kind of makes someone step back for a second. Oh, what are they going to say? Oh, okay. And now they're still interested. It hasn't drowned yet. They're not thinking about Pokemon Go just yet. Right now, everyone's thinking about Pokemon Go. But anyway, that's the key. Like, have a pacing and try it. And of course, don't say 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi out loud.
We keep talking about what you're actually talking about in the words, but there's almost so much you can communicate when you're not even saying anything, all through your posture and how you're sitting and your presence in the room. I don't know if anyone who's worked on me with the project has noticed, but I actually sit on the edge of my seat a little bit so that I can't naturally lean back on my chair, so that I can't slouch. And I'm far enough away that I also can't rest my elbow so that my head is like this because I'm bored as fuck in a meeting or something, you know? So just be conscious of how your posture is. There's also a few cool things about your posture that if you do sit up correctly, that things like tone and volume actually come easier because your body's positioned correctly where air can come out of your lungs easier. So I can say the same thing with the same posture if I sit back, then I start to get breathy and it's hard and things like that. So just realizing how you're standing, how you're moving, what your posture is if you look like inexperienced when you hang out like
or
this.
if you're in the military, or if you just really don't give a shit. It's just gonna
All of
be
these
done.
things communicate so much without saying a word, and that's falling always back to your client evaluating you and the reason why they chose Intrepid, and are you experienced enough to be working on my app?
Italians use their hands, not just Italians, right? Passion is expressed through gesture. You always want to be conscious of how often you use them, and it's not just hand gestures, it's little anecdotes, like maybe you have some habits, like I know I bite my nails a lot. When I don't bite my nails, think about biting my nails. And it's tough. Again, no one's perfect. But there are things that if you call attention to them, or if you have a friend that you trust that calls attention to them when you're practicing with them, you can get better. And you can kind of realize that your expressions that you use, the gestures that you use, really help to encourage a conversation. There's nothing, I mean, I don't want to send somebody to the hospital and I'm that excited about something where I have to break the television and, but
You don't want to be like,
you also don't want to express
Or-
no emotion. This is really important. I'm really excited about it. There's a degree, right? And you want to find that balance, and you can experiment with people too.
when you're really passionate about your work, we've all talked about we're here because we're experienced, but also because we love what we're doing. Bring that into the meeting. You might be really tired, but there are moments when the way you're showing your passion, even if it's not being loud or boisterous, but just the emotions that you're using, tone it down. I used to be a cheerleader, I have to scrape that out too. But what you're doing is you're also giving your client or whoever you're speaking with, your internal team, the reactions that you want from them. Your audience is your mirror. So if you think about how much passion you're showing and how much investment that you are showing, they're going to feel the same way and be on your side. Essentially, at the end of the day, that's what we want, is to hook them and have them with us.
So think about the technique and the stance and the form. A little bit more like your expertise, and then the confidence you use to express that expertise. When you combine those two things, that's when you get 100% engagement with somebody on the content that you're talking about.
It's just about communicating the best. Last year, my brother got married, and like every wedding, there were speeches for both the bride and groom. Both the father and sister, meaning me also, had to do a speech. So thankfully, women go first, and bride's father and sister went first. And no lie, 4 pages, front and back, like 25 minutes each. Everyone, myself included, was groaning because, yes, you love them, but good God, like, let us drink a little. And then it was my dad's turn, and I told you he's a drill sergeant. He's pretty natural. He also read the room, threw away what he wanted to say, stood up there and said, well, the other Bob, both Bob, said pretty much what I wanted to say, so I'm just going to kind of wing it. And within 4 minutes, he said something completely succinct, heartfelt, and captured everything we wanted to say because he knew the audience couldn't handle another 20 minutes. Then it was my turn, and I definitely even saw the eye rolls at that point. So what I did is kind of pulled on my old presentation skills and said, okay guys, I literally picked up my phone and was like, what I want to say can fit on the screen, no scrolling. 2 paragraphs, that's all we have to get through. The only problem is going to be at what point I'm going to cry. So I automatically prepared my audience for what to expect, and there's moments you want to do this too. And then I kind of, for the most part, ignored all the other things like posture and my tone and all of that because those were fallbacks. I knew those. What I wanted to focus on is my emotion and my passion for my subject, like my love for my brother and my now sister-in-law. And by the end of it, the rest of the audience was crying with me. So that's a win in my book.
So we talked a lot about having the right mindset in any meeting or presentation. And we talked about having the right techniques to fall back on, and now we're going to talk about sparring. So another way to think about sparring is about practicing, but being engaged and doing it, the action, right? So practice makes perfect, right? We all know that. And we have great environments to do that. One environment is what we're doing right now. That we have our Thursday lectures that people can take advantage of. If you're passionate about something, or if you're an expert more, or let's say something you just really want to let everyone else hear, you can use different environments like today's lecture slot to practice, to learn in a friendly environment how to work on your presentation skills. We have Scrum every Wednesday. You know, there are 40 to 60 people that are definitely going to be showing up, and even in that 1 minute of slot time that you could grab, that's a chance to engage somebody, to make somebody laugh, to get someone excited about the project you're doing, and that's a great way to practice. You have to be proactive about it. You got to volunteer most of the time, right? Everyone's on Slack like, oh shoot, like who's going to volunteer first? I don't want to do it. Ways to practice.
You can also use, we have apprentice classes all year round. I also try to do a lot of networking events. Like I spoke on a panel 2 weeks ago, because I want to continually hone this skill set, because it becomes more and more important as we're client-facing consultants here. But what starts to happen when you're doing all of these little bitty practice things, it's like it'll start snowballing, and these goals will start to ladder up into a really strong skill set.
And one of the elements associated with practice, with sparring, right, is you get to learn and predict things that are going to come out at you in meetings that you might not expect, right? If the opera singer is walking down the aisle, or if Mark walks into the room and you're like, oh shit, I wasn't expecting my CEO to be there. These are things that you might not be thinking are going to come in, but there are opportunities, and the more you practice, the more you can predict and bob and weave between something you might not expect but you can come back with. It works and helps improve your composure. So during a presentation or during a casual meeting, always knowing how to react, having the confidence to do that. You want to add?
No. So when we're practicing, you know, we're talking about just getting up there and standing up and doing these things. But the first question in my brain would be, okay, well, how do I start? And there are a bajillion resources out there. You know, TED Talks. I mentioned my professor earlier. There's a book floating around the room a few of us have. Welcome to borrow it. A lot of things that I say all the time come straight out of that, my courses. And another thing too, though, is if you don't want to search all of these out, super simple way is just continue what you're doing. Like watch whatever TV show or late night, whatever, and start to realize who's saying what, how they're saying it, when the audience is reacting, what their posture is, what their tone. Start analyzing people that you think are successful, and then you can bring that into what you're doing or test them out to see if they feel right for you. Okay, I know that was a lot. So we're just going to kind of take a breath here and talk about what's upcoming, what's going to be happening with the rest of these workshops.
So next up, we talked about the general art of presentation, right? Now we're going to, what we hope to bring back is we're going to send out a survey after this presentation, get some feedback. We're also going to talk about next presenting like a pro. So what is it more in the formal sense of presenting? What are things you can do, best practices when you're in an environment like a pitch? Or if you are kicking off, and how the differences in the formalities of a big presentation versus the everydays. After that, we want to kind of get to work. Maybe we can host some workshops and get people more interacting with each other and learning best techniques together. So we're hoping to hear some feedback from you guys afterwards about some workshops you might like to see.
And there's only one last thing we want to touch on. I kind of think there's a big, huge myth about presenting that to be good, you have to be a certain type of person, or to be good, you have to become that good little presenter that comes in a box, you know? There isn't really one right way to present. I think one of the more interesting things you learn when you start to get into presenting, because it is a very personal thing, is that it is not about changing yourself. Not telling you to watch what you're saying or don't do certain things. What we're saying is that take the best qualities about who you are and bring those in the right moments, amplifying those. So thinking about when you're in an interview, you do talk different. use different things about you that make you more sellable to coming to work at Intrepid or so forth. And that's all we're saying, of just taking that different shift of your personality that'll make you more successful in certain situations.
And what that really comes down to, amplifying the qualities best in yourself, is just being professional, right? And that's really what we're trying to get at. Thanks, guys.
So we definitely think we have some time. If anyone wants to ask some questions or tell us what parts you found interesting or not or something.
Okay, so as consultants, I think we can all agree that whether we're designers, PMs, devs, strategists, we are much more likely to sell an idea or a concept or a process if we appear confident when either in the presentation or just in our interactions with the client. You guys touched on confidence a little bit. But there's also that, like, it could be a totally made up statistic, but like people are more afraid of public speaking when they are dying.
Oh yeah, 100% true. Statistically on the national survey.
Yeah, so I know you guys talked about confidence a little bit, but do you have any tips on like either how to be more confident or how to fake confidence a little bit more effectively if you're not confident?
So one way to simply fake confidence is knowing the material inside and out. Like I said earlier about writing things down beforehand so that maybe if you're still very soft-spoken, at least what you're saying is really good. Actually, here, I'll just tell a funny story. So when I started to get presenting a lot before I even went to school, I went to networking events all the time because I was working in social media. So in Richmond, the social media space is really small. Everyone kind of knows everyone, so you have to go out and like show your face and then they'll help you on Twitter and whatever. And I was nervous, so I would drink like a glass of 2 or wine and then I would open up and I'd be like really chatty and awesome and outgoing. And then a few times down the road, there was this moment where I had to present in front of 400 people for the city of Richmond and its Board of Tourism to represent 30 other professionals that had volunteered to do this side project thing. And for some reason, I was the one they chose to talk. And so I did my usual. I drank my 2 glasses of wine, and then I was sitting in the prep area, 2 presentations ahead of when I was supposed to speak. And I was like, oh my God, I'm feeling tipsy. Like, this is not okay. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna remember anything because my head is like buzzing. Because I use what we all joke about of like liquid courage, you know, as kind of one of those fallback things. Don't use gimmicks to make you feel more confident because they actually don't work. Thank God my buzz like killed a little bit because I chugged water and it went like perfectly great. Actually got a promotion out of that one. But like knowing the material, practicing over and over and over so that if this thing had failed today, because that's happened to me before, like you can't always rely the content that you have, like your email or your presentation or the demo. Technology goes away, you still need to fill your client's time. So know it as much as you can, and that's what will make you feel confident.
So when I came out of school, I started a small business, and I had to figure out how to present and how to network and how to get more comfortable with the confidence thing because I needed to pay rent. And so I would put myself in situations like, man, people like doing this. I mean, I'd go to Venture Cafe, and this was like 5 years ago, waiting for District Hall and all of that stuff. And I would just put myself in these uncomfortable situations for myself and start to figure out how to deal with it. And after a while, I realized I didn't really hate it that much. It was all the prep. It was all like the you know, rescheduling the lecture 3 or 4 times before actually having the lecture. You know, things like that. It's your mind, right? But if you have that right mindset, maybe in my case it was the survival mindset, then you kind of can change the way you act and how you take action.
It's often said that, you know, when you give a presentation, folks do not really remember what you said, except for maybe the 2 or 3 key points, but they do remember how you make them feel.
Yeah.
What are, you know, some of the, maybe some tips, tricks, or, you know, you already talked a little bit about, you know, posture and performance such. to make that happen. So they go away, they're like, oh, that was fun, you know, I want to go to the next one. And
I'll snag that for a second. So, I don't talk about throwing up in a stall to too many people, right? It's not very confident sounding, but it's a true story.
it's a little funny. I mean,
It's a little funny, right? I can make fun of myself a little bit. And it's a true story, and I tell the story because it helps people realize that, first of all, it helps you connect with an audience. It helps people resonate with the fact that, oh, okay, so this person that's in front of me isn't like something I can't be too. Right? And there's a human element to it. So telling stories is a great way to connect with people and help level set. And it's irrespective of the story itself. But the more private, the more maybe uncomfortable, sometimes it helps actually make people open up.
This kind of makes me think of Martha, Mike, and I went to this management training, and this really wonderful woman came in to talk about building great relationships, but I think this kind of matches where she showed this clip about Clinton presenting, and it was just like the first minute of the clip, and then she's like, okay, what are 5 good reasons that explained that he was a good leader or good presenter? And it was things like charisma, having self-depreciating humor, so being able to fail and not being okay. I don't remember what all the 5
Yeah,
were.
it was like, yeah, it's like being self-deprecating, like using humor but not telling jokes so much.
Yeah. Oh, giving other people credit was one of them. There's a list of 5 that I'll put on the end of, there's like a little package I'll send out with this, but I think the basis of it is being genuine is how you get people emotional. Like, you know, we all work here because we're humans and we're a really interesting bunch of humans, and that's why people tend to work with us. So kind of leaning on that, I think, can kind of help us connect emotionally, like bringing out our little perks and playing them up of how that gives us a different perspective to give you better work. Does that answer?
Any other questions?
Yeah.
So earlier in the presentation, you showed a video clip with Michael Caine, and I just wanted to know what movie that was from.
Obviously, The Dark Knight.
Oh, okay.
Let's be real.
Other fun fact, my other presenting professor was called The Dark Knight because he's like Hall of Fame, like really old, like scary, intimidating guy. But
Eyes are serious.
So for developers, oftentimes we speak with the actions of the things we've made. Do you have any advice for us for how to talk through those actions in a better way? I feel like a lot of us will show more than tell.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we need to more.
And that's not just developers. Designers do that too. So we gave the designer analogy just because we're both designers, so it's easier to think of them. But talking about, as opposed to talking about on the screen, like what you're looking at when you're looking at a certain layer or line of code, right? Talk about the strategies that have gotten you there. Why are you taking it? Have you simplified that code? Why did they simplify their code? Is there some complexity? Was there some big problem you were having that was stopping the action as opposed to the complexity in what the code is solving? So ultimately, why does a client care? Was it slowing down the app? Was it crashing the app? So you simplifying that code did it enable something that they didn't have before? It's big picture things. They're paying us to execute. They don't. It's not that they don't care, but they don't even want to start trying to understand, right? They don't want to go to school for 4 or 5 years to figure that out. So it's the actions that you've helped improve.
And it's the language you use, like that kind of goes back to vocabulary. So I do it myself, the jargon, and then I realize I'll say a word and I'm like, they probably have no clue what that word means. So explaining the thoughts around it and like taking a baseline like kindergarten speak, you know, because actually I learned this just the other day. It's called teaching up, where like we have to kind of sometimes teach our clients what we're even talking about so that they can understand why we did A versus B and why that's successful. So I would kind of like simplify it down like he's saying and then put it in words that make it understandable for anyone. Like if I can explain it to my mom, my client should understand.